Welcome back, I'm Aron Bernstein. We're going to continue learning the harmonies that lead us to the 5 chord, and in this video I'll show you what is arguably the most common chord after the tonic and dominant, the 4 chord, built of course on the 4th note of the scale. And this one is pretty versatile. It can either be a predominant or it can lead you home. Our previous lesson focused on the 2 chord as a predominant, a preparation for 5. Now there's one more chord that's often used for the same purpose, and that's 4, the subdominant. However, unlike 2, 4 can either go to 5 or back to 1. And that brings us to a different type of cadence, 4 to 1, also known as the plagal cadence. So let's see these 2 different functions of the 4 chord at work. Brahms has the clarinets and bassoons arranged in our familiar 4-part chorale style. Starting on 1, we go to 4, then right back to 1. So that's a brief plagal cadence. But then we return to 4, and this time we go to our 5-7 chord. So the second time our 4 chord functions as a predominant. Listen again to how well the 4 chord works either way. Let's take a closer look now at the 4 chord working as a predominant.
Can you handle it?
We're starting on the 1 chord in D major, with the tenor and bass doubling the root on a unison. Next, the 4 chord, G major. The bass drops down to the root, G, and the alto steps up to double that G. The soprano steps up to take the 3rd of the chord, B, and the tenor already has the 5th, D. No need to move. Going on to the 5-7 chord, watch how the 4 chord has set up the tendency tones for us. The soprano steps up again from B to C sharp, and that gives us T, the 3rd of our 5-7 chord. The alto already had G, and of course that ends up being the other tendency tone, Fa, the 7th of our 5-7 chord. So just like the 2 chord, 4 sets up the tendency tones in the following authentic cadence. Down below, the bass steps up to the root of our 5-7 chord, A, and the tenor jumps down to join it on a unison. You might notice that we just have the root, 3rd, and 7th of our chord, but no 5th. So why doesn't the tenor just step up from D to E and take the 5th? Answer?
Parallel fifths.
Between tenor and bass. So again, as with the 2 chord, be careful with 4. The tenor can't move up to that E, and we can't step down to the leading tone because the soprano already has that. Remember, only one voice should have the leading tone at any time. The only practical move is to join the bass on the root of the chord. So we have to leave out the 5th, but remember, that's the dispensable tone in our 5-7 chord. Long as you got the root, 3rd, and 7th, you're good. Now, because parallel fifths are such a risk when going from 4 to 5, it's often a good idea to use inversions. Let's look at Frere Jacques, and here's a good example of what not to do. Our chord progression is 4, 5, 1, but because every chord is in root position, we get a nasty case of parallel fifths between the soprano and bass. All the more noticeable because it's outer voices. So let's use inversions to fix it. Here we have the same chords, but we start on the 4 chord, B flat major, in first inversion, 4-6 in figured bass. Moving to our 5 chord, C major, it's also in first inversion, 5-6. Now the bass and soprano move in parallel sixths, no problem there. Listen to this improved version. Looking at the inner voices, the tenor starts on the root of the 4 chord, B flat, then skips down to the 5th of our 5 chord, G, and ends up joining the bass on the root of the 1 chord, F. Notice the tenor skillfully avoided parallel fifths with the soprano, and it also avoided parallel octaves. Then our alto doubles the bass on the 3rd of the 4 chord, D, then steps down to the root of the 5 chord, C. and we can park it there when going to the 1 chord. Remember, there's almost always going to be a stationary voice in there, giving the other voices the freedom to move. Take advantage of this whenever your chords have common tones. C in this case. C is the root of the 5 chord and the 5th of the 1 chord. So, park it. Before we drown our sorrows in minor keys, let's touch up our 4 chord with a 7th. We have the same progression as before, 1, 4, 5, but this time our 4 chord is decorated with a 7th, giving us a richer, more dissonant harmony. Listen again. Let's zoom in. We're in A major, and we'll just look at the final 3 beats. We start on 1-6, an A major chord in first inversion. The tenor has the root, A, the bass and soprano have the 3rd, C sharp, and the alto has E, the 5th. Now, if we move to a plain old 4 chord, D major, both the bass and soprano would move up to the root, D, and we'd get
parallel octaves.
But instead, the soprano just parks it on that C sharp while the bass moves up to D. Now we have a 4-7 chord, a D major 7th, giving us a nice dissonance and avoiding those parallel octaves. Finally, we go to the 5-7 chord, E7, with the bass moving up to the root, E, the tenor dropping to our leading tone, G sharp, and the soprano taking the 5th, E. So adding a 7th to your 4 chord not only gives you a more rich harmony, but it can also help you avoid unwanted parallel motion. Alright, the storm clouds are moving in. In minor keys, the 4 chord is just as effective as a predominant. And with that, I'll hand it over to Chopin. We're in C minor, and notice our 4 chord is a minor triad, lowercase Roman numerals this time. Let's set up our 4 voices. And for clarity, I'm going to make a slight change in the harmony so we can see the plain 4 chord first. There. Don't worry, Frederick, I'll move it back. We start on the 1 chord, C minor, with the bass and tenor on the root, C, the alto on the 3rd, E flat, and our soprano on the 5th, G. Then we move to a plain old 4 chord, F minor. Our bass jumps down to the root, F. The soprano steps up to the 3rd, A flat, and the alto also steps up and doubles the root, F. Notice the tenor doesn't have to move. That C becomes the 5th of our 4 chord. Once again, take advantage of common tones. It keeps voice motion to a minimum, making problems less likely. Then we go to our 5 chord. No surprise in the bass, he steps up to the root, G. The soprano steps down to the root, and bass and soprano have approached this octave through contrary motion. No problem with that. Now for a little solfege. Our tenor was on Do, and it's easy to step down to the leading tone, T. That's a B natural. So again, as a predominant, our 4 chord has prepared the way for this tendency tone. Now we've got the root and the 3rd of our 5 chord. What about the 5th, D? That should go to the alto, but Chopin doesn't do that just yet. He has the F step back down to E flat. So briefly, we have an augmented G triad for our 5 chord, rather than the expected G major. This is a bit unusual and makes for a more interesting harmony. But less than a beat later, the alto steps down to D, finally giving us the 5th of our 5 chord. So back on the previous beat, Chopin has delayed the appearance of that 5th, D, by suspending it up a half step on E flat. And this is, in fact, a type of suspension, a delayed resolution of a tone causing dissonance. You can get more information about suspensions by visiting the counterpoint module. So now we have our 5 chord, but it isn't a triad anymore. The soprano steps down with the alto, giving us a perfectly prepared 7th. So this is 5-7, a G7 chord, and everything resolves the way it should to 1. Tendency tones,
resolve.
Now, a moment ago, I changed one note in the alto. I'll move it back.
Thank you.
This is how Chopin actually wrote his 4 chord. It's F minor, but the alto stays on E flat, giving us a 7th. So this is a 4-7 chord, an F minor 7th, and you can see that this way only 2 voices needed to move, the bass and soprano. So to recap, there are 2 advantages in adding a 7th to your 4 chord. You have less movement in the voices, reducing the risk of problems, and you get a richer harmony. Now earlier we saw how the 4 chord doesn't just function as a predominant. It can also go straight to 1, creating a plagal cadence. And this cadence works equally well in a minor key. No one knew that better than Beethoven. In fact, the 4 chord slides so convincingly back to the tonic that you don't even need to change the bass note. Just leave the bass on Do and let the upper voices move. Now we get the 4 chord in second inversion, 4-6-4. There's one more type of cadence for which the 4 chord is famous. It's something you typically see in minor keys, and it's called the Phrygian cadence. J.S. Bach loved this one. We're in D minor, going from 4 to 5, G minor to A major, but notice the 4 chord is in first inversion, 4-6. So the third is in the bass, B flat, and it moves down a half step to the root of the 5 chord, A. So in a minor key, when you move from 4-6 to 5, your bass slides down a half step, creating the Phrygian cadence. Notice it's not the same in a major key. Going from 4-6 to 5, the bass has to drop down a whole step. Sounds great, but it's not the Phrygian cadence. Finally, jack of all trades that it is, our 4 chord can also go to 2. So our progression is 1, 4, 2, 5. This type of chord progression is also called a sequence. We'll get to those in future lessons. That's it. We now have a vocabulary of 4 different harmonies: 1, 2, 4, and 5. Now the worksheets for this video will help you deal with the 4 chord both as a predominant, 4 to 5, and as part of the plagal cadence, 4 back to 1. All right, joke of the day. What do you call a green onion who's into hip-hop? A rapscallion. I was going to give you another pun, but that was one of my good ones, so I think I'll quit while I'm ahead. I'm Aron Bernstein, and go harmonize.